successful and a holding against at all times.
Be careful.
Government officials insist that this is an isolated incident of the packet for him.
Kerosene shadows bled across the docks that October night, smearing the Philadelphia Naval Yard in a palette of black, bruised blues, and sickly green. The war had cracked the world open like a rotted walnut, and what spilled out wasn't heroism or honor, but fear. Desperation. The naval shipyard stank of salt, smoke, and secrets. The kind of place where the fog wasn't just weather, it was a living thing, coiling between the cranes and rusted hulls, snaking around you like a memory you spent years trying to drown. It was October 1943. The war had twisted the world into something almost unrecognizable, a chessboard built from rubble and blood, and somewhere, deep in the oily guts of it, men in black suits played with forces they didn't understand. The USS Eldridge floated at Pier 13 like a loaded gun with the safety off. Freshly christened, freshly painted, but what they had planned for her wasn't found in any manual. There were no blueprints for what came next, just theories scribbled in the margins of sanity. Ideas torn from the abandoned notes of Einstein's unified field dreams. Magnetic fields, gravity waves, bending light and time like wet paper, turning a battleship into a ghost. Men in wrinkled uniforms sweated under the heavy coils of copper wire snaking across the deck, bolted to generators that sounded more like caged animals than machines. The orders were clear. Make the ship invisible to radar. The whispers were darker. Make it invisible to everything. By morning, everything would be different. At 0900 hours, they pulled the lever. Reality blinked. A low hum, barely audible at first, began to rattle the filings in your teeth. The air turned thick, syrupy. You could almost see it moving. A sickly green mist rose from the deck of the Eldridge, swallowing it whole. Then came the crack, like God snapping a frozen tree in half. For a heartbeat, the Eldridge was gone. Not cloaked, not hidden. Gone. Witnesses at the shipyard screamed about seeing a hole torn open, a glimpse into someplace colder and blacker than the ocean depths. Others swore the ship flickered back into view 200 miles away in Norfolk, Virginia, before snapping back like a rubber band stretched too far. Those who saw it said it wasn't just the ship that came back wrong. It was the men, too. They talked about sailors fused into the bulkheads, screaming without mouths. Men half swallowed by steel, their eyes wide and empty like cracked windows. Some never came back at all. Some drifted through the fog, half there, half not, like bad static coming between radio stations no one should be listening to. Most of them lost their minds, and the Navy quietly lost them. The official story? A minor electrical test. Nothing unusual, move along, citizen. The real story, buried in classified files and half-burned letters, a ghost story whispered between sailors who had seen too much and lived too long. The kind of story that smells like diesel fumes, gunmetal, and fear. They called it Project Rainbow, a name that sounded almost cheerful if you didn't know what it really meant. They tried to rewrite the rules, tried to play God with forces older than time. And for one horrifying moment, they say they succeeded. The Philadelphia experiment wasn't a glitch in the system, it was a scar, a jagged rip across the face of reality itself. And like all scars, it still itches, still burns, still whispers to the few left who remember what they saw that day. Some nights when the mist rolls in thick across the Delaware River, you can almost hear it. A low, throbbing hum, lost in the static of the dark. A ship that was never meant to sail again, calling for the men who never really came home. Today we're looking at the Philadelphia experiment, the myth, the mystery, and the madness. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Dancing Toaster. This is Nelly, and here we love truth, we love mysteries, and we love to wrestle with the intersection of faith and the paranormal. Today is a complicated affair. Today we're diving headfirst into one of the strangest, most unnerving stories ever to slip through the cracks of American history, known as the Philadelphia Experiment. Just like Roswell, we're going to walk through the story as it's usually told, lay it all out on the table, no shortcuts, and then slowly start to peel back the layers, poking at the seams and seeing what starts to bleed. Because whether you believe it or not, this is the kind of story that sticks to you. Long after the lights are off, long after the fog rolls back out to sea. It was October 28th, 1943. The day the U.S. Navy allegedly cracked the secrets of time travel, teleportation, and invisibility, or so the legend goes. Truth is, they didn't master anything, they barely survived what they apparently unleashed. The so-called Philadelphia Experiment didn't refine the rules of nature, it broke them. And when you break something that big, something ancient and deep-rooted, the cracks don't stay in one place, they spread. Down this rabbit hole, you won't just meet Roger Rabbit, Peter Rabbit, or Bugs Bunny. Madness will be waiting, fear will be watching, and somewhere in between, the lines between fact and nightmare will start to blur. It started earlier that year, summer 1943. 2 years into the bloodiest war the world had ever seen, the Atlantic Ocean had turned into a floating graveyard. German U-boats stalked the waters like wolves in steel skin, carving American convoys into scrap metal and broken hopes. Cargo ships carrying food, weapons, and fuel sank one after another, dragged under by torpedoes or magnetic mines. The war machine ran on supplies, and every ship that didn't make it meant another weak spot in the Allied chain. The Navy learned the hard way the ocean didn't play fair, neither did the enemy lurking deep beneath it. They needed a ghost, something the enemy couldn't see coming, couldn't hit, couldn't even know was there until it was too late. And somewhere in the smoke-filled rooms where desperation overrules reason, a wild idea took hold. What if a ship could disappear? Not camouflage, not clever illusions, real, genuine invisibility. The kind of thing that belonged to comic books, pulp fiction, and mad science lectures whispered behind closed doors. By fall, the idea had a name, it had a location, and it had a willing test subject. Back to the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard, October 28, 1943, the USS Eldridge floated at Pier 13. Fresh from the builders, a cannon-class destroyer escort designed to hunt submarines, not legends. But the Eldridge wasn't like the others. Tucked away below her decks, behind heavy hatches and locked compartments, sat a nest of generators, magnetic coils, and experimental machinery that didn't belong in any blueprint filed under naval engineering. The mission, at least officially, was simple. Use magnetic fields to scramble the ship's electromagnetic footprint, making it invisible to German radar and nearly impossible to trigger magnetic mines. But the rumors that drifted along the shipyard carried a different tune. They weren't just trying to hide the Eldridge from radar. They were trying to hide her from reality itself. And so, on that cool October morning, with the mist still clinging to the Delaware River and gulls wheeling overhead, the crew threw the switches. The generators roared to life, mechanical monsters howling in their cages. The deck thrummed underfoot. The steel of the Eldridge shivering like a living thing bracing itself against an oncoming storm. Then it started. A murky green mist is said to have rolled off the hull, slow, ghost-like at first, then thick and heavy like a living fog, swallowing the ship in its grasp. Eyewitnesses on nearby vessels watched, frozen as the Eldridge disappeared before their eyes. Not behind smoke, not behind clever tricks, but simply gone. No trace on radar, no silhouette against the gray water, no ripple where she had been, just empty sea, and a feeling that something had gone terribly wrong. Invisibility? Maybe, but the story only gets stranger from there. Roughly 250 miles away at the naval base in Norfolk, Virginia, sailors swore they saw the Eldridge reappear, not drift into the harbor, not arrive under its own power, but materialize out of thin air. And if the distance wasn't strange enough, the clock was worse. The Eldridge didn't just arrive miles away. It arrived 10 minutes earlier than when it disappeared from Philadelphia. Whatever they had done to the ship didn't just move it. It had torn it loose from time itself. Some accounts say the ship flickered at Norfolk like a bad transmission, half in, half out, half there, half not, before snapping violently back to Philadelphia as if reality itself had lost its grip. Late, early, it hardly mattered anymore. The timeline was broken. The Eldridge came back, but it didn't come back whole. The sailors on board staggered across the deck, burned, dazed, many of them broken in ways no doctor could fix. Some screamed about things no one else could see. Some never spoke again, they say. And the worst, well, they say some were found fused to the ship itself, molecularly welded into the walls and floors, arms, legs, faces frozen mid-scream in agony, trapped between metal and flesh. They didn't survive. Nobody could survive that. Others simply vanished, as if pieces of them had been lost in whatever place the Eldridge had drifted through. The Navy clamped down hard. The reports were sealed, redacted, buried, business as usual. But secrets that big don't stay quiet forever. They leak, they stain, they infect the places they're buried, and they grow into legends. The Philadelphia experiment isn't just a footnote in conspiracy theory, it's a scar. One still faintly visible if you know where to look. Today we're going to trace it back, to the docs, to the myths, to the strange science that fueled it all, because whether it was a misunderstanding, a hoax, or a moment when mankind really did tear a hole in reality, it's a story worth hearing.
Yeah, a story worth hearing if you're into science fiction. Come on, Nellie, the idea that a Navy ship got teleported across states sounds like someone spiked the coffee at the shipyard.
Easy, Doc. We're just laying out the story first, just like last time. Then you can tear it apart all you want. Deal?
Hey, let me tell you something. Spiked coffee's the least of it. You think it was just teleportation? Bro, that ship was just a decoy. Meanwhile, the real USS Eldridge, it's sitting under the Denver airport right now next to Nazi moon base plans.
What on earth are you talking about? Denver airport? Nazi moon base? Nellie, who on earth is this?
Well, Doctor, you rudely interrupted once again, and this time before I could formally welcome our new guest. Vincent, I apologize. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Yeah, no problem. Vincent Spacetti, but they call me Vinny Splice.
Vinny Splice, okay. You mind if I just call you Vinny?
Yeah, no problem. My mother calls me Vinny.
What is he doing here?
Doctor, calm down. I thought it would be helpful to have someone else on the show that was a little more down to earth.
Oh, do you mean the Hollow Earth? Don't even get me started on that one, Nellie. Wait, are you saying that's where the Eldridge went? Yeah, it all makes sense now. They didn't just disappear, bro. They slipped through the Hollow Earth, got picked up by the reptilians working for the Vatican, and rematerialized at Area 51. Boom! It's all connected. I'll make the charts.
Oh, I appreciate the enthusiasm, Vinny. No need for charts just yet. How about we get back to what we know about the case? How's that?
Yeah, sure.
When news began to bubble up, rumors of a Navy warship cracking the code to invisibility with bloody consequences, a lot of Americans didn't even blink. They believed it. And why wouldn't they? It was the 1940s, an age soaked in war-fueled propaganda and paranoia where everyone knew real evil wasn't just possible. It was waiting, crouched behind the next dark corner. This was a country running on black coffee, bad news, and the creeping certainty that somewhere out there in the shadows, science had found a way to unmake the world. The ground was fertile. The public didn't need much coaxing to start whispering about impossible things, vanishing ships, teleportation, experiments so secret they might as well have been magic. The barrier between the unbelievable and the achievable had been wearing thinner by the day. By the time the Philadelphia experiment story really took root, it wasn't surprising that people clung to it. A vanishing ship? Sure, in a world where cities burned overnight and new bombs could erase entire nations, what was a little ship slipping out of sight? But when you dig a little deeper, the facts don't line up so neatly. Yes, the USS Eldridge was real, but according to its own logs, on October 28, 1943, the day of the alleged experiment, it wasn't anywhere near Philadelphia. It wasn't even floating off the coast of Virginia. The Eldridge was in New York.
There it is, folks. Case closed. No ship, no teleportation, no green mist. Just another tall tale built on wishful thinking and bad paperwork.
Pump your brakes, my gosh. While the ship might have been in New York, the Navy wasn't exactly keeping its hands clean in Philadelphia either. None of this means the entire story came out of thin air, Doctor. Because while the Philadelphia experiment legend may have spiraled into science fiction, there's no denying the Navy was up to something in Philadelphia that fall.
Ho, ho, ho. Up to something. Bro, they was making deals with the Greys under the Liberty Bell, I'm telling you. First it's degaussing ships, next it's stargates and interdimensional hot dog vendors. I got the whole thing mapped out in my garage. I'll take you there.
I ain't even gonna dignify that with a response.
Okay, Vinny, slow down, buddy. Let's just stick to what we can actually verify for now. In the 1940s, the U.S. Navy was racing to stay one step ahead of the German threat, and one very real project they were working on was called degaussing. Degaussing wasn't about invisibility to the human eye. It was about making ships invisible to the magnetic mines that lurked under the Atlantic. At the time, German mines were triggered by magnetic signatures, measured in units called Gauss. So the Navy had to find a way to strip those signatures away. The early solution was clunky but effective. Wrap ships in electromagnetic coils, pumping currents through the hull to neutralize the magnetic field. It worked, but installing those coils was expensive. It was slow, and it wasn't exactly practical for a Navy trying to crank out warships by the dozen. So they had to improvise. The wiping method was born. Dragging a heavy-duty cable along the side of the ship while blasting it with a surge of around 2,000 amps, it muted the ship's magnetic signature without needing a full overhaul. Problem was, it didn't last. Sail a degaussed ship long enough and the Earth's magnetic field would start leaving fingerprints again. Keeping a ship degaussed was like keeping a knife sharp. Ignore it too long and you'd find out the hard way. And while these techniques kept Allied ships safer for a time, by 1943, Germany was adapting fast. So the Navy pushed harder. New methods, new experiments, new facilities, including, yes, work happening at the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard.
See, just boring old Navy work. No teleportation, no time travel. You string a couple of electrical cables around a boat and people think you're summoning aliens or jumping to light speed or something. You start running cables around a destroyer and suddenly every bored sailor within 50 miles thinks he stumbled onto a government conspiracy. Newsflash, sometimes the only thing being engineered is a good ghost story.
Oh, maybe, Doc, maybe. But sometimes where there's smoke, there's a whole lot more than cables burning. Even though there's no credible evidence they were experimenting with teleportation, invisibility, or anything close to time travel, officially, once you start pulling at these threads, things get complicated.
Complicated? Or just messy enough that people start seeing patterns where there ain't any? Pull enough threads, Nellie, and sometimes all you're left holding is a pile of mess.
Maybe, Doc, but before we make any conclusions, let's talk about how this bizarre story took off in the first place. It all traces back to 1955 and a man named Morris K. Jessup. Morris was born in Rockville, Indiana, and went on to study astronomy at the University of Michigan in the early 1920s. He earned his master's degree in astronomy there in 1926 and continued into his doctoral work but never completed his PhD. A missing credential that would later cause many to question his authority in scientific circles. Despite his strong academic background, Jessup spent much of his life drifting between fields, working in astronomy, car part sales, photography, and even teaching, never quite finding a permanent place to land. By the 1930s and 1940s, he was cobbling together a living, and by the 1950s, after shifting his focus to the controversial and often marginalized study of UFOs, he found himself living through a rough, hand-to-mouth existence.
Maybe you should learn from his fate. Think about your wife. Think about Michelle.
Shut up, keep my wife's name out of your mouth, and please let me finish. In 1955, he published his most famous work, entitled The Case for the UFO, a book that would cement his cult status among believers but would also push him even further to the edges of mainstream science. In it, he discussed unidentified flying objects, strange propulsion methods, and the idea that alien technology might not be as far-fetched as people thought. The book hit a nerve. Despite our beloved Dr. Wright's criticisms, Jessup was not just another crank shouting into the void. He had real credentials, a scientist who spoke their language, a man who had studied the skies through a telescope long before he started chasing mysteries hidden in them. When he suggested that maybe, just maybe, humanity didn't know as much as it liked to think, that the unknown deserved more curiosity than contempt, people listened, especially the ones already watching the skies with wide eyes and restless hearts. The UFO community grabbed onto Jessup's words like a lifeline, proof that they weren't crazy, that the questions they kept asking weren't so easily dismissed after all. After the case for the UFO hit the shelves, Jessup's mailbox started filling up faster than he could empty it. Envelopes stuffed with strange sightings, wild theories held together with little more than hope, and long letters from true believers desperate to prove they weren't alone in what they'd seen. Some wrote like scientists. Some wrote like poets. Most wrote like people clinging to a secret too big to carry by themselves. And somewhere in that growing mountain of paper and ink, Jessup found a letter postmarked from a man calling himself Carlos Allende. A letter that would turn his already strange career into something much darker and much more dangerous. Allende's letter wasn't just weird. It was a Molotov cocktail thrown through the window of Jessup's life. In rambling, uneven handwriting, Allende claimed that during October 1943, he had been serving on a merchant ship near Philadelphia, and that he'd personally witnessed the USS Eldridge vanish in a green mist. Allende said it teleported 250 miles to Norfolk. He said it arrived 10 minutes earlier than when it left. And he said when it reappeared, the crew had been twisted, fused into the ship's hull, their bodies screaming silently from inside the steel. The men who didn't die outright, Allende claimed didn't get much of a mercy. They were shattered, minds splintered, reason burned away, left wandering between realities they couldn't explain and memories they couldn't outrun. And according to Allende, there was a method to the madness. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a glitch. It was science. Brutal, blinding science. He insisted the Navy had unlocked one of the final forbidden doors of physics, Einstein's unified field theory, the mythical merging of gravity and electromagnetism into a single, monstrous force that could twist time, space, and flesh like wet paper.
Right, because if there's one thing you can count on during a world war, it's the Navy secretly solving the greatest problem in physics and then immediately losing the notes.
Stranger things have happened, Doc. This will even lead to some of what Stranger Things, the Netflix show, was based on, but that's coming next week. You've heard the old adage, Doc, desperate times, desperate measures, and all that. Sometimes history's biggest accidents started with somebody flipping the wrong switch. But we got to get back now to this Carlos Allende character. Could Allende be trusted?
Almost certainly not.
Doctor, bless you, even a broken clock is right twice a day. Allende was indeed sketch. I'm sure you won't be surprised to find out that Carlos Allende was just a name he hid behind, a pseudonym. A paper-thin mask worn by a man with a restless mind and a habit of blending fantasy with memory. His real name was Carl Meredith Allen, a drifter by nature, a dreamer by compulsion, and a man deeply entangled in the world of UFOs, fringe science, and government conspiracies.
Oh, he must be a friend of yours.
Not quite, Doctor, thanks. Carl started flooding Jessup's mailbox with letter after letter, each one stranger, more frantic, and less coherent than the last. Stories of vanished ships, sailors walking through walls, men bursting into flames, all delivered in a breathless style that made it almost impossible to separate fact from fever dream.
Oh, his letters sound a little bit like this show.
Oh, really, Doctor? You mean the show you're about to get kicked off of? I'm gonna try and put you through a wall. Maybe we can make you burst into flames.
Let's calm down. Let's get back to the matter at hand. I bet you Carl wasn't even at them docks.
Actually, that's one of the only things we know he was telling the truth about. Carl Allen had served around the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard during the time he claimed the Eldridge disappeared. It said he was serving aboard a merchant ship called the SS Andrew Furuseth, docked near the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard in that October of '43. But there still is a major problem with his story. According to every credible record, the Eldridge wasn't there when Carl was there, which leaves us with the question that still lingers in the smoke of this whole legend. If Carl Allen wasn't describing the Eldridge, what exactly did he see? Did he see anything at all? Allen's letters weren't just strange because of the claims. They were strange because of the way he wrote. Jumbled thoughts, broken logic, sentences that tripped over themselves like a drunk chasing a ghost. He said sailors could walk through walls, said some caught fire and burned for days, said others simply disappeared. The claims were chilling, the details half incoherent, and yet something about them stuck.
That's because people like you and that Jessup fella eat this stuff up, not to mention your new boy Vinny over there.
Jessup, for his part, gave Allen a fair shake. He wrote Allen back and asked for evidence of these claims. Allen answered, but with even stranger ramblings. By that point, Jessup washed his hands of the whole mess. But the story was far from over, because about a year later, 2 officers from the newly formed Office of Naval Research, ONR, showed up on Jessup's doorstep. And what they brought with them would drag the Philadelphia experiment deeper into the realm of myth than anyone could have predicted.
Hey, ONR. Bro. That's just a cover name. They're the ones that run the real Men in Black. Me and my cousin seen it. Black cars, no plates, sunglasses. At night they show up, your dog disappears, your cat starts speaking Latin. It's real, Nellie, I'm telling you.
What? His cat starts speaking Latin? Nellie, where do you find these people?
All right. Let's stay focused. There were real ONR agents involved, but no Latin-speaking cats, at least none that we know of. Like I said, the Office of Naval Research took an interest, and I'm sure Vinny's not too far off with the black suits, black glasses, and I'm sure blacker budgets. If ONR showed up at your door, it wasn't because they liked your ideas, it was because your ideas probably wandered somewhere they weren't supposed to. Officially, the ONR was the branch of the Navy responsible for scientific research and special projects. Unofficially, they were the ones you hoped never had a reason to know your name. And somehow, they knew Morris K. Jessup. A copy of his book, The Case for the UFO, had landed on a desk at ONR headquarters, but not in its original condition. This version was laced with handwritten annotations, 3 sets of them, allegedly written by a group who called themselves the Gypsies. The Gypsies' notes weren't casual scribbles either. They referenced secret technologies, whispered about the Philadelphia experiment, and even claimed that aliens, big gray-headed nightmares, had been involved in the disappearance of the USS Eldridge. Half-baked science marinated in madness and served up cold. Jessup didn't need long to recognize the handwriting.
Was it Carl?
It was Carl.
Hey, but get this, what if it wasn't just Carl? What if Carl was getting his info from the real breakaway civilization, you know? The ones living inside the hollow moon, pulling strings, feeding him half-truths, half cannoli, keeping the real stuff hidden?
I'd asked how Hollow Moon fits into World War II naval experiments, but honestly, I value my brain cells too much.
Well, Vinny, we do know Carl had a habit of mixing fantasy and memory. Whether or not the Moon Mafia had anything to do with it is a conversation for another time. Jessup knew it was Carl Allen, aka Carlos Allende. He had disguised himself, or at least tried. Different colored inks, different styles of writing, a weak attempt to impersonate 3 entirely fictional commentators.
You'd have to be totally insane to fake 3 other people.
Ooh, is it hot in here? Moving on. One of them, Allen later admitted, wasn't even supposed to be human. But Carl was the primary and original source for all the wild versions of the Philadelphia experiment stories that we know today. The core claims of teleportation, invisibility, sailors fused into walls, green mist, mind control, and even time travel all come directly from Carl Allen's letters to Morris Jessup in the 50s. And of course, all the handwritten Gypsies annotations found in Jessup's The Case for the UFO. Those were all the work of Allen faking all 3 personas. Even the linking of the Philadelphia Naval Shipyard to radical secret Navy experiments is Allen's storytelling, exaggerated from the real degaussing and radar masking tests happening at the time. Carl Allen's account was never independently verified by any credible witnesses. Nobody else at the Philadelphia shipyard ever came forward. None of the Eldridge's actual crew members ever confirmed anything he said. In fact, many flatly denied it when they were asked decades later.
Didn't it all happen during the daytime as well?
Yep, allegedly around 0900 hours.
If you're gonna make something up, at least use the excuse of the cover of darkness.
I know, right? He kinda shot himself in the foot with that one. Over time, as UFO culture, conspiracy theories, and Cold War paranoia grew over the 1960s through the 1980s, other writers and filmmakers began adding their own flourishes to Allen's original story. More elaborate time travel theories, alien involvement, secret underground labs, all layered onto the foundation that Allen laid. Bottom line, Carl Allen lit the match, but the world was covered in gasoline. Without Carl Allen, the Philadelphia experiment would probably have been a forgotten footnote in World War II's electromagnetic warfare efforts, not a legendary ghost story of teleportation, time warps, and sailors welded into steel. The Philadelphia experiment myth grew in stages. We saw first in '43 the U.S. Navy conducted very real experiments at shipyards involving degaussing, radar invisibility, and magnetic field reduction. Important but ordinary wartime tech with nothing remotely resembling teleportation or time travel. Then in '55, Carl Allen dropped his bombshell, letters to Morris K. Jessup claiming he had witnessed the USS Eldridge vanish in green mist, teleport to Norfolk and back, and return horribly altered. Wild, vivid, and rambling, but with no corroborating evidence and no other witnesses. In 1956, Allen escalated things by forging fake gypsies commentaries inside of Jessup's book, written in different inks, different styles to simulate a conversation between three entities, one of them being otherworldly. Strangely, the Office of Naval Research was knocking on Jessup's door. That's the one major mystery for me still in all of this. Why did they have any interest? But by the 1960s through the 1980s, as UFO culture exploded, Cold War anxieties deepened, writers inflated the myth even more, injecting elements like the time travel, teleportation gone wrong, government cover-ups, secret projects bleeding into the Montauk Project. This is the one that would later inspire Stranger Things, but again, that's next week. Today, thanks to decades of books, documentaries, radio shows, and podcasts, the Philadelphia experiment is locked into pop culture, even though it all traces back to one man, one stack of strange letters, and one wartime Navy project that had nothing to do with tearing holes in reality. Still, the fact that the Navy didn't just laugh it off, that they took the annotated book seriously enough to have it privately reprinted and show up at Jessup's door, well, that set off alarm bells in the minds of conspiracy hunters, and as I shared, it still sets off alarms for me, but to what end, I don't know. If there was nothing to the Philadelphia experiment, why did they care at all? Maybe because, even if the Eldridge never blinked out of reality, the Navy was knee-deep in invisibility research as early as '43. Maybe Allen's fever dreams hit a little too close to classified truth. Lesson learned: if you're going to dream up wild theories about government experiments, you might want to whisper instead of shout. Because somewhere, someone is always listening, now more than ever. While Carl Allen spiraled deeper into his obsessions, chasing shadows of a ship he claimed to see, Morris Jessup was running out of road. After the initial success of his book, The Case for the UFO, his career crumbled fast. His second book flopped. The third crashed and burned so hard his publisher dropped him like a bad habit. Jessup was a man chasing his own past, desperate to get back the brief moment when people believed he had something important to say. And in the Philadelphia experiment, he thought he found his second chance. He started pulling at the thread Allen had dangled, collecting the rumors, half glimpses, scribbled notes, anything that might stitch the story together. It became his obsession, as these things often do. And obsessions, like bad wiring, have a way of catching fire. By 1958, Jessup had compiled enough material to fill a small vault. He handed his research over to a trusted friend, a zoologist and anomaly hunter named Ivan T. Sanderson. Some of you might remember Sanderson from our episode on the Flatwoods Monster. Yeah, same guy. Same sharp mind, chasing different shadows. Whether it was creatures in the woods or classified projects at sea, Sanderson had a nose for the weird and a bad habit of getting too close to the flame. Jessup handed over his research with a chilling warning.
Keep this safe just in case something happens to me.
And something did happen. On April 19, 1959, Jessup called another friend, Dr. Manson Valentine, and said he'd made a breakthrough. He sounded energized, excited. He wanted to meet the next day face to face to share what he had found, but he'd never make the meeting. On April 20th, Jessup was found dead inside his car at a park in Coral Gables, Florida. A hose ran from the exhaust pipe into a rear window, sealed tight with rags to keep the gas inside. The official story was carbon monoxide poisoning.
Case closed then, right? I mean, I'm sad to see how he went out all in despair and whatnot, books flopping, weirdos, the only ones paying him any mind, but doesn't his self-checkout mean we can call it a day?
If only it were that simple, Doctor. They performed no autopsy. No further investigations were made. It was quickly labeled as suicide, but not everyone was okay with that conclusion, nor how things were playing out after his death.
Come on, just because there was no autopsy, people will cling to anything, I swear.
Some said Jessup had stumbled onto something real, something the Navy couldn't afford to let out. Others, a little more like you, pointed to the slower, quieter demons. The failed career, the broken marriage, the wreckage of a body that never fully healed. They said the darkness wasn't sent for him. He carried it inside all along. Both stories still linger, wrapped around each other like frayed wires sparking in the dark, and nobody's ever really untangled them. Whatever Jessup gave to Ivan T. Sanderson, those pages, those warnings, well, they never saw the light of day, which is also very confusing. Maybe Sanderson tucked them away, maybe they ended up in a forgotten box in some dusty library basement. Maybe like so many pieces of this story, they faded into the background, filed away, forgotten, or deliberately buried. Not gone in a flash of green mist, just lost the slower way, over time. One more ghost woven into a legend that's always been better at raising questions than giving any answers. What do I think? No, the USS Eldridge didn't vanish in a swirl of green mist. And no, the sailors weren't stitched into the walls of their ship by forces they couldn't comprehend. The real mystery is probably us. If you're still here listening at this point, maybe you're like me. We crave the unexplained. We cling to it. We build castles out of questions, but some of us do it even when the sand won't hold. The Philadelphia experiment, like Roswell, like so many legends that refuse to fade, isn't just about what might have happened. It's about the ache to know there's more beyond the horizon. Because deep down, we know the world isn't just gears and grinding machinery. We know there's more out there, something flickering at the edges just beyond reach. But not every story holds a miracle. Some are tangled in misunderstanding, in fear, in desperation, and in deception. But even the broken ones remind us why we search. For men like Carl Allen and Morris Jessup, chasing those mysteries wasn't just a hobby. It became a calling, and a weight too heavy to carry. Carl Allen and Morris Jessup weren't just chasing fame, attention, or nonsense, at least not entirely. They were drawn towards something bigger, the possibility that the world held deeper mysteries than what most people saw. They caught a glimpse of that possibility, even if misguided, even if only in their own imaginations or in fragments of half-truths. And once they saw it, once they believed there might be more, they couldn't just go back to living like it wasn't there. It consumed them. For Carl Allen, it meant obsessively writing rambling letters, desperately trying to convince others that the unbelievable had occurred. For Jessup, it meant throwing away a safe conventional life, chasing answers to the point that when his career collapsed and hope dried up, he didn't have anything left to fall back on. They believed the unknown was real, that it was beautiful, powerful, and more exciting than the boring, broken reality they both lived in. And sadly, that belief eventually destroyed them, because they couldn't let go of that hope, the mystery, the idea that there was more just out of their reach, even when everything else was telling them to move on. Now here's the part that might surprise some of you. The idea of making things invisible is no longer science fiction. It's not just some ghost story from the 1940s rattling around shipyards and cigarette smoke. It's real research that has gone on historically even into today. Modern military labs, DARPA think tanks, defense contractors, even universities backed by government grants are chasing the same old ghosts.
Bro, I'm telling you, they already got it. I saw a cloaked helicopter land behind my cousin's deli last Saturday.
Well, I can't verify that, but they are bending light, they're twisting sound, they're teaching radio waves to slip around objects like rivers around a stone. They call it metamaterials, engineered substances that don't behave the way nature normally does. Materials designed not to be seen, not to be touched by radar, not to leave a footprint in the world we think we understand. And while it's not quite teleporting battleships through time, it's still chasing the same ancient instinct that's been humming in the human heart since Eden. The desire to slip unseen through the world, to hide from danger, to master forces bigger than ourselves. A troubling reality about the majority of our technological advances is that they're usually intended to destroy each other. The Canadian company Hyper Stealth has already unveiled something they call quantum stealth, a paper-thin material that bends light so perfectly it can hide a soldier, a vehicle, even a building depending on the angle. It's not magic, it's physics, twisted and bent until our eyes can't tell the difference. And they're not the only ones. Militaries around the world are racing for the first true invisibility cloak, for tanks that vanish on the battlefield, for jets that disappear into the sky, for soldiers who can walk unseen through enemy lines.
Hey, Nelly, you forgot to mention the real cloak tech. They got entire cities going invisible now. I swear on Nona's grave, bro. Whole blocks disappearing off of satellite images. That's why you can't find Bigfoot. Guys living in one of them with Elvis and half the guys from the 85 Mets.
Oh, for heaven's sake, now Bigfoot's got an HOA living next to Elvis?
Vinny, man, I appreciate the passion, but right now let's stay focused on the stuff that we can verify, at least mostly.
Yeah, you'll see. They'll all see Bigfoot's paying dues and dealing with inflation like everybody else.
So while the Philadelphia experiment may not have cracked the code in 1943, the hunger that fueled it, that wildfire belief that invisibility is just one clever breakthrough away, that's still burning, hotter than ever. And maybe, just maybe, it proves something deeper than any classified file ever could. The veil between seen and unseen isn't just something we observe. It's something we still desperately are trying to tear through. To command, to control, because deep down we know the true mysteries aren't just beyond our reach. They're right here, breathing down our necks, woven into the fabric of the world we keep trying to outsmart. And no matter how much technology we build, no matter how many cloaks we stitch together out of light and ambition, some things were never meant to be hidden. Some truths will always shine through the fog. And here's another thing we can't ignore. One of the reasons stories like the Philadelphia experiment feel so believable is because our government has a track record of doing real, horrifying things behind closed doors. We're not talking about pulp magazine paranoia. We're not talking about bedtime ghost stories or some sci-fi junk sold in the back of comic books. No, we're talking about black ink on white paper, declassified, undeniable shame stitched into our history. Programs like MK Ultra, we've touched on this before, it's still going to get its own episode, where the CIA decided that the human mind was a playground or just another battlefield for them to conquer. They dosed unwitting American citizens with LSD. They fried synapses with hypnosis, electric shock, and sensory deprivation, breaking people open to see what was inside, as if the soul was just another machine part that they could rewire. Men, women, soldiers, prisoners, students, none of them volunteers. Most of them never even knew it was happening, and when it all fell apart, the files were burned and the survivors left to pick up the pieces of a puzzle they were never meant to solve. Or take Operation Northwoods, a plan cooked up in polished Pentagon rooms by men wearing crisp uniforms and heavier secrets. A sick proposal to fake terrorist attacks on American soil, hijackings, bombings, murders. Blame it on Cuba. Use the chaos to rally support for a war. Sacrificing innocent lives to stir the drums of war. And it wasn't just a few crackpots in a basement. It made it all the way to the Secretary of Defense's desk. And don't think for a second it was the only time. Or we could talk about Tuskegee. Real nasty stuff. The U.S. Public Health Service took black men with syphilis, lied to them about their treatment, and then sat back and watched them die. Watched wives get infected, watched children be born sick, all because they wanted to observe the natural progression of the disease. For 40 years they watched, and for 40 years they said nothing. These aren't legends. These aren't conspiracy theories tucked into the margins of crazy blogs or comment sections. They're documented, sealed by official signatures, later dragged into the light only because somebody with a conscience refused to let the truth stay buried. So when someone whispers about ships disappearing or sailors phasing through bulkheads or experiments ripping holes through reality, you can't just laugh it off, because if they could, they would. You can't blame people for leaning in a little closer, for listening a little harder, because history teaches us something ugly. If the stakes are high enough, if the fear runs deep enough, if the right men are locked in the wrong rooms long enough, they will do things you would swear were impossible. They will commit sins you would think belonged only to the villains of history, and they'll do it with a pen, a handshake, and a smile. Sometimes the real monsters don't crawl out of the fog. They walk through the front doors of government buildings and hang plaques on the wall. And sometimes the truth is stranger and darker than any myth. In a world where governments have betrayed trust before, is it any wonder people still lean into stories like the Philadelphia experiment? But beneath the classified files and conspiracy theories lies something deeper still, something older than any war or any weapon. Maybe the Philadelphia experiment didn't happen exactly the way the legends say. Maybe it never happened at all, but the world that gave birth to the story, that part was very real. A world where secrecy was currency, where human lives were expendable, and still are to some of the same types of people. Where science, fear, and ambition braided themselves into something twisted and deadly. And in that kind of world, the unbelievable doesn't feel so unbelievable anymore. It feels like a coin toss. Ultimately, we wonder, was it madness that drove Carl Allen and Morris Jessup to chase shadows? Or was it something else? Something deeper? A yearning stitched into the seams of every human soul. The unshakable feeling that we were made for more than what we can taste, touch, or bury in the dirt. The world we see with tired, mortal eyes isn't the whole story, my friends. It's only the outer shell, the dim reflection, not the source. And sometimes, if you're quiet enough, if you listen hard enough, you can almost hear it. The distant hum, not of a naval ship, but of something greater, something older, something alive beyond the veil. Scripture tells us this hunger isn't a defect, it's a design. Hebrews 11:3 reminds us that what is seen was not made out of what is visible. The world was built on invisible foundations. Reality itself is an act of faith held together by hands we cannot see, spun out of the breath of God we barely dare to comprehend. The longing for mystery, this ache for more, it's not foolish. It's not madness. It's one of the truest things about us. We are creatures made with the capacity for wonder because we were meant to walk in a world woven with it. Ecclesiastes 3:11 says it with a weight few dare to carry. He has set eternity in the hearts of men, yet they cannot fathom what God has done from beginning to end. Eternity isn't just a future reward. At times it's a present haunting, a reminder every time we reach beyond ourselves that we were meant for a kingdom not yet seen, a glory not yet grasped. But yearning without wisdom is a dangerous fuel. That's where we sometimes go wrong, where Allen and Jessup and so many have gone wrong, in chasing wonders without a map, in opening doors that weren't meant to open, and believing that anything mysterious must be holy and anything hidden must be good. The enemy of our souls knows the hunger too, knows how to shape mirages out of smoke and broken promises, knows how to bait the faithful with counterfeit wonders, lies that look like miracles from a distance, but rot the soul when touched. The longing isn't the danger. The danger is forgetting who that longing is supposed to lead us to. Not the Navy. Not new technology, not green mist and government secrets, not gray humanoids and intergalactic answers. but the living God, the Lord Jesus Christ, who spoke mystery itself into being. The real unseen world isn't a glitch in a shipyard. It isn't a secret filed under top secret in some dusty cabinet. It's the reality behind reality, the kingdom that breaks through in burning bushes, in torn temple veils, in an empty tomb rolled away by hands stronger than death itself. Maybe that's why the Philadelphia experiment still lingers, not because it proved anything about warships slipping through space and time, but because it scratched at something real. The suspicion that there's more, that we are unfinished, that we are reaching for a home our feet have never walked, but our hearts have never forgotten. At the core of today's legend was stealth tech in hiding. Well, the first stealth tech ever attempted wasn't made in a lab or a shipyard. It was made in a garden. Foliage, fig leaves sewn together by trembling hands, not to deceive the enemy. They were sewn to hide from the holy gaze of the God they had betrayed. And ever since then, humanity has been running the same code, trying to hide, trying to slip unseen through a world that was never meant to be this dark. Trying to build technology, power, camouflage, anything to avoid being seen for what we are. But the real stealth tech isn't what cloaks a ship or scatters radar. It's shame. It's sin. It's fear that the eyes of a holy God might look into us and see everything. And yet the same God we hide from is the very one who came looking. "Where are you?" he called to Adam. Not because he didn't know, but because he wanted Adam to remember who he was. So maybe all of our invisibility tech, all of our legends, all of our reaching to be more than we are, maybe it's all just echoes of that moment, trying to rewrite a story we broke, trying to disappear from a presence we were made to dwell in. But the gospel doesn't offer stealth. It offers something better, to be fully known and still fully loved. Not hidden, not cloaked, but cleansed and restored. The story of the Philadelphia experiment isn't just about what men tried to do with machines. It's about what all of us are still trying to do, to find our way back to a world we know exists, but can't quite touch yet. I want to thank you once again for going on this wild ride with me. I hope you learned something. If you didn't, I hope you at least had a good time. I hope you found this entertaining. I hope you've seen that just because I have a supernatural paranormal podcast, this doesn't mean I blindly accept every theory and every story that's out there. We can't, my friends. We must be discerning. Truth must matter. In a world of blurred lines, cover-ups, and counterfeit wonders, we can't afford to be gullible. We can't afford to be careless. We must love truth more than we love mystery. We must love the real more than we chase the romantic. I want to give a special thank you to my patrons that make this show possible. Please go check out the Patreon if you have not done so already. $5 a month gets you early access to the show. I may have some sponsors this summer. Patrons get ad-free listening. You also get access to the member-exclusive show entitled The Man-Eating Toaster, where I cover cults and true crime. This month we covered a serial-killing Orthodox nun and a narco-Satanist cult in Mexico. Real wholesome stuff. We're having a nice time over there. It's not for your kids. Go subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a comment, leave me some reviews on Apple, on Spotify. If you do, leave a piece of bread emoji to let everyone know you're one of my toasties. Like and share, do all the things wherever you consume the dancing toaster. But whatever you do, don't consume toasters and don't let terrifying naval experiments consume you. I love you.
Hey, Nelly, real quick, before we go, you forgot to mention the time-traveling dolphins working for DARPA. I swear to you, bro, it's all connected.
Maybe next time, Vinny. Maybe next time. Don't consume toasters, and don't let any time-traveling dolphins consume you, apparently. I love you. I'm out.
Report suspicious activities and call 911 for immediate response. Expect delay.
Nobody else will be taken from the south. Stand by.
Flight 022, maintain approach. You're clear for
Expect traffic delay and restrictions. Take personal security precautions to avoid becoming a victim of an attack. Avoid crowded public areas and gatherings.
Roger, 527, maintaining
Be careful.
Government officials insist that this is an isolated incident different from the packet for him. But that will help us. Perhaps we will continue to keep you informed concerning this story unfolds.